Good evening, welcome to the City of Franklin Council meeting. We're going to start off with tonight's meeting with a public hearing. We actually have two of them tonight. The first one's going to be on the land development code for subdivisions. We turn this over to Barry.
Well, first we need to do a call, roll call, sorry. The roll call, would you like me to do the roll
Yes,
call?
please.
Okay, Mr. Cott.
Present.
Mr. Shakespeare.
Present.
Mrs. Jones.
Present.
Mr. Powell.
Yes, present.
Mr. Stiles.
Present.
Mr. Wolf.
Present.
Mr. Ullman.
Present.
I'll defer to my colleague here.
Thank you. I don't have really anything tonight other than to answer questions. The last time we met, I sent out a redraft of the code. It was dated 4/2/25 council or city council meeting, and the few changes we had were made in red. And other than that, I'm here just to answer any other questions you have.
I think our name was on the storage buildings.
I think the mayor wants to talk about that.
Okay.
This is for the subdivision code. yes.
Okay, thank you. No, I didn't have any questions. I thought all the changes were great.
I did notice there was one section in there about trees, in the tree zone and the city zone along the streets. It says, I'm trying to find the specific language, but it says if there's not enough trees in the yard, that the city will obtain that 16 foot and we're putting trees in.
What page are you on?
Let me find it, I wasn't prepared.
These trees we're dealing with are only, there's two types of trees. One is that there is a tree preservation. If the developer comes in, they're going to do a tree inventory prior to cutting down the trees. And so that section, I'll find it quickly if I can. And so that is part of the analysis. Okay, so it is on page, it starts on page 12, tree inventory and assessment. It doesn't say it doesn't give requirements of replacing trees, but we want to know what trees are. And because during the process, and it happens a lot of times that the developer will go in and cut trees down before they get into approvals. And the commission will say, well, this is a really good cropping of trees, why didn't we keep that? It could have been open space. So we put that section in. Originally it wasn't in, and as we worked through our meeting, we did that. And there are some there are some protection measures. The other one are the street trees, and that's on page, I'll get to it here, towards that. And basically, we have street trees that go in that strip the tree line. And what it says is, by the type of development, if you're in a rural development, there's not a requirement for street trees. But if you're in like 30-foot lake development, there's a requirement for street trees. And they're pretty much on, depending on lot size, they're on 7. So it doesn't necessarily say every tree is 60 feet apart. It just says the developer comes up with what the lineal feet of the streets are. It comes up with a number, let's say it's 50 trees. And then they plant those trees in the tree line as best they can. Now, there's been a question about, well, should we require street trees for developers, and should we just make it an option? And it's easier, I always found out that when you're in negotiation with a developer, is that it's easier to negotiate out of a position of strength than a position of weakness. And so the commission, so if you have something in the code that says you have to plant street trees, and the commission always has the ability to modify that, rather than trying to get the developer then to put street trees in if you don't require them. So, and that's why, and you'll see in the code, there's a lot of things that that probably aren't gonna happen. We have regulations on dead-end streets. We really don't want dead-end streets, but there has to be a regulation for it. And there's regulations for cul-de-sacs. We typically don't like cul-de-sacs because they cause a lot of problems, even though people love to live on them. I lived on one, Barberton, for 18 years, 17 years, loved it, but there's other problems, even with street crews and things like that, and utilities. So there's regulations on that. You can do it, but, it's not a preferred method. We want streets to intersect. And there are other things like we had in there about the roundabouts. We really don't want roundabouts, but we have to have a regulation for it. And we have to have something in there. If a developer wants to build it, they have to build it to a certain standard. And that's why you see a lot more things in this document that may not happen. And again, this document is really a document that is a place for developers to use when they build something. And that's why we have a lot of analysis that we didn't have prior to this. We have other things, and traffic analysis, 2 types of traffic analysis, because we want all that information. We want it for you and for the planning and zoning commission to make informed decisions with information. You don't want to make a decision that you have to try to get that information from the developer. It's there. This is what we need. So getting back a roundabout way, street trees are tree protection. If it's 100 acres, 50 acres, before you cut any trees down, we want to see what's there. And then there's street trees, and those street trees would be in tree lawns based on the lot sizes, how you do it.
Gotcha. I was specifically it was a mention of the street trees, and I think the code, as it was in there, said the city will put trees in. And I kind of was just wondering if that had to be a will or maybe possibly a may in that. As you're saying, that's not necessarily automatically a mandatory thing.
You can do that, but I'm just saying that is when you have something in, most developers do street trees, and that's what people want when they're building new houses. But like I said, is that the trees are there, the regulations are there, what type of trees, and they're there, again, because it's easier to have the commission say, all right, for some reason, you don't need street trees, there's a lot of trees, rather than try to get a developer to put them in. It's easier to give them a modification of the code than try to negotiate with them. And that's why a lot of these things you have them in here. And the Planning and Zoning Commission has that ability to modify a subdivision. There's requirements of how you just can't do it, no basis, but it does have it in there. And so that's why it's in there. And again, it's not for all streets. We took it out of the rural type streets, which would be what we call R1 or CD type streets where you have, over 2.5 acres and 2 acres. You don't necessarily, you could put clusters of trees in certain places. And also, I've seen before with street tree requirements is that sometimes there's not a lot of right-of-way ability in your tree lawn, even though we have requirements for tree lawns. It's hard to get a tree lawn in. And the commission was able to say, okay, we'll waive that, but in the beginning of the development, you're planting trees, or you're planting trees in certain areas. So you have the ability. The number of street trees is based on linear feet of street. It doesn't say where to go. So technically, you have that ability to play a lot if it's needed. But again, I said I always rather negotiate with the developer in point of having good, strong regulation.
And is that only in the beginning when you're, these regulations for when they're going in? Let's say a landowner later on has a tree removed out of the front of their house, they're not going to be forced to then put one in?
No, this is just for new development.
No. And if they do put that in, then the landowner might have an opportunity. There's an adequate place where they can come and read that.
Sure.
Perfect.
Typically the way this gets done is in a new subdivision, streets go in, and it's done a couple of ways. One is that the developer, once the streets get in, you know where the drivers are, the developer comes in and plants those streets. And I've also seen that the builder sometimes, the developer, there's a fee as part of your building permit for zoning is that when the building comes in, they have to plant that tree based on what was approved by the commission. So a different way to do it.
So based on the trees and stuff, is this more of an aesthetic requirement, or is it for the urban canopy?
It's a road.
Okay. So let's say the trees aren't really needed or wanted in a certain area, can you do a provision there for funds in lieu of? So if they're going to be required to present a certain monetary value for trees, and they don't want trees in a certain area, can you have that money basically given to the city to plant trees in another area at that same value?
We don't have that. It's just, the table on page 75, it just says residential districts and like, so it basically just says that by the type of tree is how the typical space.
And who determines the type of tree?
The code, that was a big discussion we had at Planning Commission. We had it more detailed, but the commission said, no, we just want you, we have some suggestions, things you can't do that are bad trees. And then based on the type of tree you're planting, that would be a commission review, and staff would review it and say that, these are good trees. Yeah, typically what we try to do now with street trees is try to use more native type trees. And if there are certain street trees that the root system goes down, but yeah, those type of trees you want to pick out. But they gave that ability to the zoning department to work with the developer on the trees.
Thank you for the clarification.
Anything else? Are you guys comfortable moving forward with this, or do you feel that, I don't see any reason for any additional time on it, but that's.
I'm good.
You're good to get a vote? No? Would you need a motion, or just want to, do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion.
Second, we have a first and a second. Do you have to, do you vote?
Yep.
No.
Not yet, not yet. Let us go do a roll call. Mr. Cox.
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer.
Yes.
Mrs. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Powell.
Yes.
Mr. Stiles.
Yes.
Mr. Wolf.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes. Motion passes 7-0. And we have a motion to close the public hearing.
So,
We have a first and a second, Ms. Jones and Mr. Wall. Is the second?
Mr. Cox.
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer.
yes.
Mr. Jones, or Mrs. Jones.
Yes.
Mr. Powell.
Yes.
Mr. Stiles.
Yes.
Mr. Wolf.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
All right, meeting is adjourned. Next will be our public hearing for, this is a public hearing for a proposed tax increment financing district, 1 and 2. The city will be posting, or the city will be proposing and considering the establishment of 2 tax increment financing districts in relation to what's come to be known as the Water 9 Development. The Ohio Revised Code Section 5709.40 requires notice and an opportunity to be heard by the property owners in the areas where the district would be formed. The only such property owners for this proposed district is the Atkins PLX Holdings LLC. Notice of public hearing was delivered by regular U.S. mail to the property owner, Atkins PLX Holdings LLC. The signed acknowledgement of the receipt by Timothy Atkins. So we have a roll call for this public hearing, please.
Yes. Mr. Cox.
Present.
Mr. Schaefer.
Present.
Mrs. Jones.
Present.
Mr. Powell.
Present?
Mr. Stiles.
Present.
Mr. Wolf.
Present.
Mr. Holmes.
Present.
All right. So now we would give the landowner proper representative an opportunity to speak.
You guys. Yeah. Stay there. You're good there.
Jason Dodson, counsel at Atkins PLX Holdings LLC. We have no comment here for the hearing this evening. So this is obviously a step in the process, and notice has to be given to the property owner. But in terms of any objection or anything like that, we have the property owner, we have none. Thank you.
Council have any comments or anything? I know we're going to probably hold this for a few weeks. Is that fair to say?
Well, this will conclude this hearing,
Right.
and then we'll be moving forward
I
with
just
the
want to make sure
legislation.
I know we've got some people want to make sure they know there's not going to be any action or anything. We'll have discussions and,
Absolutely.
okay. All right, so I'd make a motion to adjourn this meeting. First and a second.
Okay, the roll call, Mr. Fox,
Yes.
Mr. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Stiles,
Yes.
Mr. Wolf,
Yes.
Mr. Owens.
Yes.
So with that, we'd like to start our committee meetings for the regularly scheduled meeting for May 7th, 2025. We'll start off with the Streets and Drainage Committee, Mr. Ullman.
Before we do that, do we want to speak about the storage containers?
We could. So, let's get that here.
There's nothing really on the agenda on that, but I was going to address it in the mayor's report. But since we have Mr. Guer and Mr. Gano here, rather than, I'm sure they'd love to stay for the whole meeting.
So to address the storage containers, when we were talking about Article 8, this was back in September, I know we had some concerns. Throughout the city, we have a lot of people that have the, I'll call them the pods type storage containers already in existence. And one of the concerns was we don't want to pass something that's going to have a negative impact on people with existing conditions. And it was our understanding that that would be a non-conforming existing use, and there would be no ramifications against those people moving forward if those, if the new conditions were adopted. Since we have found there's somebody who actually started going on to an existing condition, and as part of going on to the existing condition, they were asked to take down the structure, which is understandable because there's a process to go through for that. But there is also some concern that the existing storage containers were not allowed. And I know we got a legal opinion on that, but I know we had an understanding as to how that would be handled. You can go back just to verify, I know that the resident has receipts and stuff, but just to do a simple search back to street views through Google, you can see they're very well on Onset Hill, which is prior to when that would have been adopted. So we've since got a legal opinion from our attorney, and we could have some discussion on how we want to handle this. I know myself, I don't want to have a negative impact on people who have these in existence. I know a bunch of people that have them, and if we need to go back and revise that could be something we could do, or if it's just a matter of putting something on record that anybody beyond that point, anyone prior to that point, won't be forced to conform to the current standards.
May I speak about that?
Absolutely.
All right. And I don't have a pro or con or a dog in the fight. I'm not looking for a particular outcome. I'll just tell you what I understand, I guess, the current status to be, based on the law, for lack of a better term. I know there was some suggestion that I think it's clearly that specific case. It appears those storage containers were there before the Article 8 was amended. Looking at the code provisions that existed before we amend them, they would not have been permitted. The storage containers were only permitted on in a couple limited purposes, basically for commercial, if there was a tear down or if somebody was moving in or out. Again, I'm not saying that's the way I want it. That's the way it was written. That's what existed before it was amended. I know there was discussion about storage containers when you looked at Article 8. But what's in Article 8, again, would not permit storage containers in those, really, basically in that situation at all. So in either case, it's not, there was discussion about this to be grandfathered in. Well, to be grandfathered in, you had to be a legal existing use prior to the amendment, and the storage containers were not. So it appears to me that there's only a couple options. If you leave it as it is, then the city would be, the administration would be charged with enforcement. Not just there, but anywhere else that there might be. I've been told that there are a lot of them around the city. I've talked with so many guys I'm sure, I don't dispute that maybe there are, I haven't really seen them, that doesn't matter. What I think would be required, I don't know if we can just look the other way on it, and I don't think that from a legal standpoint, we can just tell other people that they're grandfathered in, when in fact their use was contrary to what zoning was. Because that opens the door for us, where who else wants to be grandfathered into something that was contrary to zoning? So I think the remedy is such to try to permit these, if we want to permit them, is to refer this matter back to planning and zoning with the instruction that you'd like to revisit that particular issue. Because, and in the meantime, if council wishes to defer any enforcement, subject to whatever comes back out of there, we can certainly defer any enforcement in the interim. But I think what we've got to be careful of is this. What do we want to permit and where do we want to permit it? And maybe, there probably wasn't an in-depth discussion on that when this was being adopted. So, in other words, just a couple of things. Do we want them should we limit them only to commercial? Or can they be used in residential? Okay? If they're used in residential, do we want to put any limitations on where they're placed? Do we want limitations on how long they can be there? Can I put one in my front yard? Okay, well, no, I hope not. I don't want one in the front yard across from me, in a small 60-foot lot. How many can you have? It's an accessory building. I mean, it's treated as if it's an accessory building. So do you want to have a limit on how many of these you could have? Could you have a total of 2? One accessory building and 1 pod, or 2 pods, okay? Or do you want to allow 3 or 4? Does it depend on acreage? And it does depend on where you put it, relative to property lines and, the back of the house, you don't get to put it in your driveway. I don't have strong opinions on any of those things, but I think those things need to be addressed within the code if we're going to permit them. Because currently, they're not permitted. So I just think it needs to be readdressed. And I think the way to do that is, well, if it's going to be readdressed and the code is going to be amended, it has to start with planning and zoning. So it would have to go back to planning and zoning. So that's my take on it.
All right, I would like to address this. I'm glad that Mr. Goodell is sitting here. I currently have a shipping container. When I got my shipping container, I called Barry and I said, what kind of permit do I need? First thing out of his mouth is, they're not allowed. I said, that's great, and I'm looking at the zoning code right now, what page is that on? Next statement was, it's not in the zoning code, we just don't like it. All right. Being who I am, I said, I don't care what you like, I don't care what's legal. And I have a letter from Mr. Goodell in the zoning department saying I could have my shipping container on my property. So if they weren't legal or allowed to be in, he would never wrote a letter. So they were not addressed in the old code. So we now have an issue. So we can't go back and say they weren't addressed in the code when they weren't. I know of quite a few shipping containers around. And I know we don't want to get into that legal fight with those property owners to get those containers removed.
It sounds to me that, I'm sorry, when you finished.
Yeah, no. So what I'm saying is, we can't say that they weren't allowed in the code and then have a letter from zoning saying I'm allowed to have one when it wasn't addressed in the code. And a shipping container is not a dumpster. There's not a fine line between a dumpster and a shipping container. 2 different uses.
And I hadn't seen the letter, I'm sure it exists, and if it was issued, there's certainly a possibility it was issued in error. That's a possibility. I don't know the answer to that. But I know, I took a look myself at the previous code, which is under Article 14, Section 1400.02, defines a portable storage unit as any enclosed unit of any type of construction or material designed for permanent or temporary storage, which can be transported by a vehicle and left on site. So that sounds like a storage container to me. And it goes on under section 800.01C4, portable storage units are not permitted as a principal permitted use, permitted accessory use, or as a conditional use in any zoning district except when used in the following situations And under temporary construction sites, which expressly limits their use to clean up or restoration of a property for a maximum of 180 days, or when the owner of a property is relocating, it can be there for a maximum of 30 days, not more than twice a year. So I take it your word, and I believe that letter that you got was issued in error. And because the code is pretty clear to me that under the prior code, they couldn't have them. You only had them in those two circumstances. So going forward, I don't know what would come in a particular case where someone was told that it could have them. If that ended up in court, I don't know what would happen. But if it's sitting on somebody else's property and they just have it there, and the city's got two choices: either look the other way or enforce the code. I mean, this isn't to pick on anybody. It's no different than any other part of the zoning code. We either enforce it or we don't. I don't have a strong feeling on this. If we want them around, well, I get this feeling. I think they serve a purpose. If we want to allow them, I think that we ought to make sure where we're on them and how many we want to have. 150 on somebody's lot. So I think it's manageable, but I think we've got to go back to the code and talk to planning and zoning and decide what makes sense. And Fred, what do you think?
I think it's easily fixable. I think right now, the only thing we did with the new code compared to the old code is we made them as temporary accessory structures. We moved them out of the other section that was the accessory buildings and structures. And so a lot of it was in the old code. It's still in the new code of temporary construction. You're allowed a residential, one temporary business, industrial, you're allowed 3. But the only difference I see is that we combine all storage containers, whether they're pods, whether they're dumpsters, whether they're shipping containers. I think if you have a reason to believe that you want the ability to have people that have shipping containers and use, you just need to decide where you want them. Commercial properties, industrial. I know like Walmart now, before they used to just have them for Christmas season and things. And now I know it's going by Walmart the other day, they still have 2 beside their building that they use for extra storage. So I get it. So we just need to figure out how you want to address these. And since we're taking Article 8, it's going to be merged with the zoning. It's going to be all in the new Article 3, which is zoning. We can make, depending on what you want, we can write that in there and separate shipping containers and have limitations. So it's not a hard fix, but we just need to know what we're doing. Because the mayor's right, we don't want to legally open up a can of just a can of worms and then people start using these and have 50 a year. But it's based on what you want. We can make those changes, but we just need to know what we want.
So I'd like to bring up something here too. I mean, definitions are good if they're written well, but a bad definition can leave you standing there with a can opener. By the actual definition that was cited to us, any enclosed unit of any type, of any construction or material. All right, so that could be a wood structure, that could be a steel structure, that could be anything. It could be fiberglass, whatever you want to call that. All right. The second part of that definition is designed to be permanent or temporary storage. So that could be something you're adding to your property, or that could be something you're temporarily adding to your property. Right? And here's the thing. It goes on to say, which can be transported by a vehicle and left on site. So if you go down the street to Manchester Road, there's a place that sells pre-built yard storage facilities that are transported to your property on a vehicle. How does that not conform? Because by this code, by this definition, you can't have one of those storage units brought to your house on a truck without being in your yard without being in violation.
One thing you wouldn't hear me do is defend the language in the previous code.
No, I'm just saying, so when you get a bad definition,
I've been saying for a long time, that's why we're trying to do what we're doing.
The new code allows temporary, it says what those temporary.
Yes.
The old code sort of was kind of strange, you didn't know what it was permanent, but it was just storage. So we haven't got to a total update of the definitions. We'll be working on that soon. But so we tweaked the definitions a little bit and we added something new. But if things were there already, we didn't change them. So, and the other thing is, if someone's selling these things, or that's a business, so we're not counting that. That is your outdoor storage. That is, it's like selling a car. So, you have to go.
Which business is outside of New Franklin. So we're selling them. But my point is, when you buy one and it's delivered to your house, they're on a vehicle.
Yeah.
That meets that definition.
You see, a pre-built barn could be transported by a vehicle and put on a lot. That's what
Yeah,
that's what
that
we're
definition needs to be.
And then you see, if you drive around town, you'll see some of these storage containers have actually been merged into the garage or whatever. It's actually become part of the structure. And so there's a lot of,
Yeah, I mean, it can be, some of these shipping containers, people get very innovative. So you have to draw the line in the sand, well, how do you want it?
When we were talking about this, you guys were talking about them being, if they were already on the property and you guys said legal and conforming. And I said to you, define legal. And after a few minutes, the mayor said we can use the word existing. So that should cover.
I was wrong when I said that.
But you got put in.
Assuming I said that.
You can go watch the video.
Yeah.
I'll go through the non-conforming.
yeah, so maybe we should go back and look at the definitions, come up with a way. Do we put I don't want to say a moratorium again, but kind of like we did with.
Defer enforcement.
Yeah, like the
Well, we
chicken,
discussed.
we pause that,
Yeah,
and we can fix the issue, and then we can move forward.
Yeah, if I may, I think, and I talked to Glenn about this, I don't like the definition that's there. I didn't like the old one, and I think the new one, obviously, we need to refine that. But the word shipping container, to me, there's, and I remember talking to Mrs. Jones about this, and then there's downstairs in the shipping containers. And
Yeah.
there are varying uses for these things. So I think there should be a specific definition of a shipping container. And my only concern I really have with them is people are buying them to build houses on them now. How are we gonna handle that when the time comes?
I think it's also pertinent to note this. We had a separate conversation about getting one of these for our evidence. Yeah, so, I think there's a place for them,
I do too.
it's just a question of, but I just think you need some parameters.
And once you figure out, we can build it. Yeah, the shipping containers may not be temporary. If that's what we decide. Whatever we think is good, and we'll take it back with an amendment to the commission, because we're doing that section actually next week. It's not part of the shipping container, but we're doing the zoning next week. So the third week we're out about it. And we can deal with it. I just need to know some parameters, that's all.
And there is a difference in the quality of the shipping container too. You can get a one-time use one that looks almost brand new, and you can get one that's just beat to crap that nobody's gonna want to look at. So we have to take that into consideration.
Well, I think the mayor's right. We need to send this back to planning and zoning, let them go through it, get their opinion on what it should be, and have it presented to us to see if there's any modifications. But the initial changes or modifications or however they want to handle it, that should be through them and let them come up with those parameters. And if we want to put a moratorium on enforcement, we can have a resolution next meeting to do that. But I think we just move on to the planning zone and let them do their job. They've been pretty good so far. I think they are.
I'm comfortable with that. Yeah. I think, I don't know that we're gonna need a resolution because we're really not doing a moratorium. We're not talking about prospectively what people are allowed to do. It's just a question of whether or not, so I think if we get the intention of council, which I read, that we'll defer enforcement while we're having this discussion.
You just have to pause it.
We won't take any, the administration won't take any action while it's being reconsidered. And we'll state that for the record and include that in the minutes.
Since the committee's gonna do.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, they have video
Oh,
minutes,
we'll
not
memorialize it
minutes.
somewhere. I'll send that out to everybody.
Thank you. All right, now we're gonna enter into our committee meetings. Streets and drainage, Mr. Almy?
Guys, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a nice evening.
We'll open up the Streets and Drainage Committee at 6:35 PM, starting off with resolution number 25R25, a resolution awarding a bid to North Star Asphalt Incorporated for the City of New Franklin 2025 paving declaring an emergency. We got 6 bids for this, so starting from the most expensive to the cheapest would be the Shelley Company at $1.384 million, Parent Asphalt at $1.095 million, Harbicus at $1.1 million. Oh, I did not do it from the most expensive to cheapest for total, but we have also had Carver at $1.1 million, Superior Paving Materials Incorporated at $1.02 million, and North Star the cheapest at $941,233. Our advisors at OHM Advisors reviewed all the bids and made a recommendation for the city to move forward with North Star Asphalt's incorporated bid, and I believe that we have a little bit extra money from the beginning of the year, so we're able to do our alternate routes, which would be a base bid from Minnesota, so Grove to the Clinton line, Faith Avenue, Hiller Avenue, Channel Avenue, Donna Avenue, Townsend Avenue, Bronson Trail, Franks Road, and Skyline Drive. Does anybody have any questions or comments or anything?
If I could,
Yes, ma'am.
if I could, and what you read, those are the base bid. So,
Yes.
yeah, what the resolution would do, would be to accept the base bid and not the all bid at this point.
Right, not the full. Right?
Yeah,
Not the full one,
Yeah.
yes.
Right.
Yeah. So the base bid, and then there, as you mentioned, the
Yeah.
contingency is put in, the 10% contingency.
Thanks for doing that.
Yeah, that was a good suggestion.
So then the base bid for, for the roads we're having done, as I understand it, then it's $576,665
Yes.
with a 10% contingency, bringing it up to $643,000, $331.50. Is that correct? Am I reading that
Yeah.
correctly?
Base bid. My apologies.
And their contingency allows for, when they're going to bid on this, they're going to bid on square footage, lane miles, whatever figure they're using to calculate that service. If they get into an area that needs full depth repair or burning or anything else additional, this contingency allows them to efficiently keep moving forward instead of coming back to council and seeking approval for additional funds.
Everybody comfortable waving it through?
Yes.
Perfect. We will close the Streets and Drainage Committee at 6:38 PM.
All right, next we're going to move on to the finance committee. Mr. Potts?
Perhaps I know this one's yours, but if you don't mind, I'll take it.
That'd be great, thank you.
Excellent. We'll open up the Finance Committee at 6:39. We have one resolution up for consideration this evening, and that is Resolution 25R26, and that is a resolution authorizing New Franklin to enter into an agreement with ETC Technologies for purchase and installation of servers for New Franklin administration, finance, police, and fire departments, and declaring an emergency. I have a few comments. I'll review the bids on this. First, wanted to say the servers we're replacing went into service around 2012. So we're eked out almost 15 years worth of service out of those existing servers, which is an absolute eternity in the tech world. I think we certainly squeezed out every possible dollar we could from those servers. Second, I took a look at the specs for the 2 servers that we're providing. With hardware and licensing and the additional 7 years of support on that, they price out at around $16K each. So that's about $32,000 for those 2 services. The quote we got from ETC is for $36,000, so that leaves less than $4,000 in labor to convert, we'll create a new network, new virtual hosts, and convert a half a dozen different servers, plus upgrade, and plus bifurcate some of the network into different sections. That's a lot of work for that amount of money. And then finally, I know there was some discussion about obtaining multiple bids for this project. I'm not sure that ETC is our current provider for IT services for the city. bringing someone else in to scope this out and put new servers in, kind of bypassing ETC and then putting this ongoing support maintenance backup on the ETC, I'm not sure that's in the best interest of the city. That's a smart move. Additionally, I know there's got to be a ton of sensitive information on these servers, and bringing in a secondary company to be looking at that. And at the very least, we'd have to draft probably confidentiality and non-disclosure agreements before we even get them in here. For that reason, I think in this case, it's probably in the best interest of the city to go with our existing provider. Those are my thoughts. If I'm incorrect anywhere, you guys feel free to correct me or Sims. What do I know about it?
That's what you do for.
I have a degree in computer science,
Okay.
and I haven't provided this kind of service for a long time, but I do authorize purchasing from my company for these kinds of services. So,
That was, it couldn't have been better expressed. Even though, but it would have been close, we got Stephen Cook. But he's, yeah, so he's nodding his head, yes. And the only other element I would add is the pricing has become very dicey at this point in time, relative to tariffs, et cetera. So we've got this price locked in, but there's no guarantee. I think we had 30 days and we got the quote a week or two ago, so it really would be helpful if we could move on this and lock this price in. But you didn't know that it really came to our attention also because we're at a point where we're near failure on a server and can't get parts. So that's really why, that's what percolated this to the top and rather quickly. Although we've been working on this now for about a month to get to this point. So we're here and it would be helpful if we could move on this tonight.
All right, I have just got a couple comments. I'm always the guy that says I want multiple bids so we know what we're looking at. I think with any type of money this size, with multiple bids is good. I understand and respect Mr. Stiles' points there. My concern is that, and I don't remember, Ms. Cook had sent me an ETC contract a month ago because I asked to review it. And I don't remember what the expiration date is. My concern with the theory that Mr. Stile has is that when that contract comes up, we're going to be locked into a non-bid situation with renewal of that contract as well. I believe that was a 5-year contract. I don't know if you guys remember when that was.
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Yeah, I read it, but I don't remember. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't want to be in a position where in 18 months or 2 years, whenever that contract comes to light, that we're in the same position. We can't go and get another company because ETC's been handling it and now get jump through a bunch of extra hoops to renew that.
We brought
Be
these,
locking in at a price that could be higher.
I'm sorry. I mean, it's the apples and oranges. We're talking about the cost of the servers. We're not talking about our contract with ETC to provide their services for us. We had servers in place when we brought ETC on. We had a different provider who provided our maintenance, et cetera. So it's not only is it not impossible to switch vendors in that regard, but we've done it already once. So I wouldn't be aware of anything that would be prohibitive, if in fact at some point we're not happy with ETC, that we decide to go with a different vendor, they'd certainly be competent to address any needs we might have relative to the service.
Yeah, just to clarify, that 7-year service contract, that's through Bell, that isn't through ETC. I only bring up the fact that ETC is currently providing our contract, and sticking someone else into the contract could be difficult. Certainly not impossible, and I don't see any reason this would.
And I looked at this on,
change to a whole different federation.
as we went through this process, the price went up a couple $1,000s while we were talking. And when we got this bid, with this quote, they indicated to us that they thought that perhaps that might be a 48-hour quote. And in fact, they were able to lock it a little bit longer. So if we decided to do an RFQ and go out for bids on this thing, I have every reason to believe it would be substantially more money. I appreciate, I didn't know, I hadn't done the pricing, I'll be honest with you, but I appreciate the fact that Mr. Stout brings that to our attention internally. So it sounds like I didn't feel that we were being taken advantage of. We had Stephen Cook, who's helpful to us in that regard. He knows the field, so I was comfortable with the pricing, but I have every reason to believe that the price, if we spend another a month or 6 weeks or 8 weeks on this, we're gonna spend more money, and there's a very good chance we're gonna be back here doing telling you that we think ETC is the best proposal, and probably to the tune of an extra 10 grand or so. But I understand in a normal situation that we want bids, and we're trying to follow that wherever we can.
So who is our IT specialist that recommended this upgrade?
Ethan?
Well, it started with Mr. Cook.
Okay.
I'd like to hear from
You want to hear? Yeah, I'm going to explain how this came to our attention.
Yeah, please.
So, before I forget, just on Mayor's note, reference the quotes and stuff. So, we've been in talks for a little while, probably about a month, and the quote before this one, they could only, Dell and like the provider was only holding that quote for 48 hours. And that was, a couple weeks ago when the tariffs became a thing, and it was, I think we had to probably do 3 separate quotes because to get us to the council meeting. So quotes were only 48 hours. So the fact that we were able to secure this one, I think for 30 days, they were very surprised that they were able to secure that number. But I can answer any kind of questions. To answer, I think, another question, the whole process was brought up due to a PD server was starting to chirp, throwing an error, and I reached out to ETC. They were already aware of it, and it's actually a piece of the motherboard that has failed. It's not a critical piece, but it is required. So that part, because of the age of the server, the PD server is actually the oldest and was, we're using a ship date. That PD server was shipped in 2011. So like Mr. Shaw said, that's a 16-year-old, I believe, server. The other ones range from the newest one we have is from 2014. So, these they need to be replaced. But that's the whole reason this issue got brought up, was the fact that the PD server could be replaced, or the part could be replaced. So we're looking at speccing out a new server for the PD, and then kind of in this whole topic, realizing how old the other servers are, we kind of came to this conclusion where we could basically shrink the 4 or 5 that we currently have into 2. And those servers are powerful enough to host everything we need. And because we're doing 2, they're going to share the load. But if in the event one were to need to be replaced, or a part were to need to be replaced, the load from this server can be moved over, pretty quickly to the other server to minimize downtime. So we're not going to be out a day of work because our servers are down. We would just move all the data from server A to server B, or vice versa, and operations can continue. So it's really all I've got. If anybody has any kind of questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Yeah, so just like our CDE programs, Sourcewell, stuff like that, I know Dell offers a government program to purchase stuff through.
Okay.
Do you know if this is being purchased through the government portion of the program? The reason I'm bringing that up is ETC can probably, on our behalf, get that pricing on these items with the government discount.
Sure, I do not know the answer to that. But, again, Mr. Sells took the words out of my mouth to begin with. With the licensing, that's also 2 additional UPSs or battery backups. That's the servers themselves, plus all the labor it's going to cost to install the servers, migrate all the data from the old servers to the new servers, and making some network changes on the city's behalf. So I think it's a good price point, but to answer your question, I don't know if that's government pricing through Dell or not.
So who is our internal team member that is trained and qualified to test and validate critical systems, services, and application after each migration or upgrade as stated on page 7 of the quote?
Say it again?
I'm asking, who is our internal team member that is trained and qualified to test and validate critical systems, services, and applications after each migration or upgrade as stated on page 7 of the quote?
So I think I would probably be that team member in conjunction with ECC.
So you are trained and qualified to be able to do that, to validate the critical systems services?
Application for sure,
I mean,
I don't know if I'm qualified, I mean.
it's what's in their quote as what the city will provide, so that's why.
Sure. This is I'm kind of the lead, I consider myself the liaison. ECC is our MSP, they're our primary company, but I'm just kind of the person in the middle between the city
Sure.
and ECC. So anything that I'm comfortable doing and I know I can do proficiently, I'm going to do anything I can. I will defer to ECC to make those.
I will tell you that, I mean, that is listed among the client responsibilities, and Stephen has been able to provide that service for us. So
Okay.
he's extremely fluent in this area. If he didn't exist, we'd find somebody. That's what we have to do. Probably as a contract basis, independent contractor basis.
Okay.
Any other discussion?
No, it would be nice to have those other quotes, even though they're not valid anymore, sent out so we can at least see what the pricing was.
Sure.
When you talk about the other quotes, those were all quotes that came from ETC. But those were all Dell quotes. They weren't other providers or from other vendors. In other words, he got pricing, and then we continued to talk.
Correct. Made some
And then
changes.
when he got it, then the pricing was only good for 48 hours, and we talked some more, and then he went back and got it, so.
And we had to make some specific changes in regards to VIP, the requirements that they had, that we had to include in the servers.
Okay, it still would have been nice at the same time, that when you started a month ago, to the two different vendors to get pricing, so at least we could add something to compare. It doesn't say that we'd be taking the lesser of the two bids, we would have been taking the more qualified bid. In this case, it may have still been ETC, but it just would have been nice to have bids so that we can say we did our due diligence.
I totally understand. And to Mr. Sal's point, the kind of the ETC is our backbone, so to kind of go to, and I totally get your point, but to go purchase through somebody else, have somebody else install, but then ask ETC to maintain is kind of not, I don't think is normal. You typically kind of stand with your provider. For example, like for the fire department, we buy we buy radios through a certain company. Well, if something were to happen to company A and we don't want to work with them, company B is going to say, we're not going to, it's not the same radio. We didn't purchase them for you. We're not going to help you. So I have seen that, in person in different aspects of.
Yeah, I can understand that too, but again, my memory is short and I don't remember what the expiration date on the ETC contract
Sure,
is.
yeah.
If it's in 6 months or 60 days or something, then we're talking a whole new different ballgame.
Sure.
So all those things should have been taken into consideration. That's all I'm saying.
Thank you.
Anything else? We comfortable waiving the three on this?
Yeah.
I'll close this meeting of the Finance Committee at 6:53.
Next, we go to the Safety Committee, Mrs. Jones.
Safety Committee, resolution number 25R27. A resolution declaring necessary to levy an additional tax in the excess of the 10 mil limitation to replace an expiring 5.75 mil fire/EMS levy to enable the city of New Franklin to provide fire protection services and ambulance and emergency medical services as authorized by Ohio Revised Code Section 5705.19 in parentheses I, and declaring an emergency. This is something that we talked about, we even mentioned it, I think, a few meetings ago. This is not something that we can put off. This is something that we have to have it. We are just down to the bare bones and we need it, and we have to go for it. It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, Paul, we have to do it this way because laws are probably going to be passed that we won't be able to do a renewal again. We need this money in order to ensure that we have the same type of service that we have been getting and that we've all grown used to. Everybody knows how the prices are going up, and I can think of no better way to spend it than for the lady that's had them to my home many times. That's the one person when I'm sick or Randy's sick that I want to see. And I want to see them in the best gear, the best equipment, the best trucks, and cost at that time doesn't matter to me.
I think one thing to mention, so we can do a renewal, if I'm doing a word, but we can't do a replacement.
We can't do a
Exactly.
replacement.
So
I'm sorry.
the state's changing the laws on replacement levies and language, and you can't call them a replacement levy anymore. So now you gotta present them as a new levy, a new tax. And that's why I think the legislation reads it as a new tax. It's exceeding 10 mils. It's not that we're asking for 10 mils for the fire department. It's just gonna be another 5.7 that we currently have. But because the total millage of everything is over 10 mils, that's why it's gotta say it exceeds the 10 mils. The current levy is gonna be expiring at the end of the year.
Yeah.
So that's the main funding source for the fire department, and that's why we're putting it back on to renew that.
At the same village,
It's the same
But it'll
number.
generate-
It's just going to be reading differently.
it'll generate additional funds.
Yeah, so the previous the previous levy, the one that's currently in effect, it's based on, was it 5 years ago? 4.5
Yes,
years ago?
5 years.
It's based on the property values from 4.5 years ago. So when if this does pass with the new vote, it'll be on the current property values, and that's how it generates more money.
And it's a two-step process. This is what's known as a resolution of necessity, and then we send this back down to the fiscal office, and the fiscal office has 10 days to respond to us to confirm that. And then what will follow is a resolution to actually place on the ballot the 5.75 mill levy.
Which will have the computations from the county as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's fair to also mention, we've had a handful of meetings between myself, Ms. Jones, Mr. Cox, and fire staff to talk about the best way to approach this, the needs, and, one of the things we've had is, I don't want to say a staffing issue, but, we need to retain the folks that we have. So at one point, we were at the bottom of the pay scale, so we had to make some equity there so we weren't getting poached by other neighboring communities. And then as far as keeping staffing levels with both this department here at this location and then the west side, we're trying to keep minimum staffing there because if you get somebody injured or if you have somebody call off or use their vacation, now you're just short and you may not have the qualified staffing enough at a various locations. So this is part of that, just maintaining the existing level of service.
Does anyone have a problem with waiving this fee?
Mr. Cox, would you like to say anything?
No,
You're part of the
you guys have said it all. I think the one thing just to emphasize is that the current levy that we're operating under is a 5.75 mil. It's been 5.75 mils for 20 years. And this new levy that will get hopefully on the ballot in November replaces what's currently there. So we keep it at 5.75. It's not an additional levy, even though that's what it says. And so it can be kind of confusing, but it's actually replacing a levy that is expiring at the end of the year. So there's not going to be two levies.
I'll make sure we have a firm number for us, but at least the initial projection was for I think the median household value in New Franklin is $200,000, and using that $200,000, this levy would increase property tax by about $140 for the year. So $70 for each half. So when you talk about spending a little bit of extra money to make sure that
Well, as I said, that's the person I want to see. And at that time, we all have been there, I'm sure. And that is what you're thinking of, you want the best. I'm not saying you have to spend more money to get it, we're just asking for the same, but we do need it. We need it desperately at this time, and it's up to the residents to pass it. So I'm going to ask that we waive the reading. I'll close the safety committee at 7.
All right, next is community development, Mr. Shaker.
We're going to open up Community Development Committee at 7 o'clock. Resolution number 25-R-28. Resolution adopting an economic development plan for the Water 9 at Turkey Foot Lake Incentive District Number 1 and the Water 9 at Turkey Foot Lake Incentive District Number 2 and declaring an emergency. And I think we're just asking for time for this tonight. Do you have comments or anything?
Well, this is statutory. I mean, this is the beginning of the second round of discussions relative to the water night. What it's going to involve, as was indicated earlier, was the consideration of tax increment financing, or TIF. So we'll go into plenty more detail on that. Council's, we've had discussions on it. The parameters of that process provide for allocation of what the additional tax revenue will be if in fact the development is fully developed, and then how those funds are allocated. Probably the steps here are statutory. So we have to, the resolution itself speaks to adopting an economic development plan. And that economic development plan is basically, the city now has been approached by a developer, as we all know, because we spent about the last year talking about it, through planning and zoning and through council, to develop the water right. So they've developed that for us, and the city's response then, under the statute, is to respond with an economic economic development plan, which essentially says, if you're going to do that, we don't have the current infrastructure to support that. And as you see, there's an addendum here from our city engineer that confirms that we don't. And of course we don't. We don't have sewer and water in that location. So this is one of the necessary pieces to then proceed with creation of the TIF districts. And that's what we'll talk about in a minute here on the two ordinances, 25001 and 25002, each of which creates the two TIF districts that have been discussed in detail in the past. So this is how this is the train moving down the tracks on the statutory requirements to do that. What I will do, I've spoken. We're represented by separate counsel on this. Jason Butterworth, and I've asked Jason to be at the next meeting. There's a lot of documents attached to all three of these, to the resolution and the two ordinances. I thought it made sense to give the public an opportunity to view it, to give council time to go through it. We've spent a lot of time going through it already, but you guys have only had it for a few days. Come back here in 2 weeks, have Jason here, have questions from council, have questions from the public. And I think I'll leave it maybe to Jason to sort of give the nuts and bolts of what TIF financing is about. I can do that, but I don't know if today's the day to do it. I think we'll just give a chance, take some time on this, review these documents, and be prepared to have a more full and complete discussion on the 17th, and then still move to a third reading. So we're going to be looking for 3 readings on this.
Any other comments or questions?
Will those documents be on the website?
Yes. Yeah, we've generally put our legislation on there, right? Patent legislation?
Yes, I'll double check with Kate.
Two of the documents are a little bit still in flux, and I'm getting ahead of myself, but it mentions that in the ordinance. The school compensation agreement, and that's the agreement that they'll have with the schools, and then also the development agreement with us. We're just cleaning up the minor details. Our major details are already in place. So they're in draft form, but we expect to have those in final form by the time we come back on the 17th. When we do, we'll post the drafts and then we'll post the revisions.
When you say you'll have them on the 17th, are those won't be the 17th, the 17th?
I'm sorry, I keep the 21st. I got it in my brain.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
the 21st.
Will that be a signed agreement from the schools? When does the school sign their agreement?
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that.
I saw we had the signed version when Mr. Vogel reviewed everything. I'm just wondering, when does that take?
Yeah, I don't know when they take action on it. It's been related to me that they support this. But I don't know, I can't tell you the sequence.
Any other comments, questions? Okay, so we'll close the Community Development Committee at 7:05.
All right, and our last committee is going to be Laws and Ordinance. Mr. Wolf?
We'll open the Laws and Ordinance Committee meeting at 7:05 p.m. I'm just gonna read both of these and then we can talk, if that's okay. Come back to back. Ordinance 25001, an ordinance authorizing the creation of a tax increment financing incentive district, the Water 9 on Turkey Foot Lake Incentive District Number 1, pursuant to sections 5709.40, 5709.42, and 5709.43 of the revised code and declaring an emergency. Followed by ordinance 25002, an ordinance authorizing the creation of a tax increment financing incentive district, the Water 9 on Turkey Foot Lake Incentive District Number 2, pursuant to the sections 5709.40, 5709.42, and 5709.43 of the revised code and declaring an emergency. Mr. Mayor.
Okay, again, I've spoken to these, and this is really the other part of the puzzle. But these are important, and they're exciting. This is a first for the city. So these two ordinances would actually create the two TIF districts, and it's in these two documents that you find the pertinent attachments that I mentioned. The development agreement, the compensation agreement, et cetera. So that's ultimately council will, at the third reading, well, you take longer if you want to, but at least that third reading, which we, at that point in time, we look for council to vote on creating these two TIF districts.
I'd like to ask for time.
So the question on this though, is the reason we're doing two different districts because of the size? Is there a 30-acre limit on the size?
I thought it was because of the phases.
Yeah.
I think it's related to the phases, yeah.
The ones that apply to the Austin unit.
Right.
That's the
Yeah,
second phase.
there's phase 1, 2, and 3. And ordinance 1 is for the first phase, if I remember right. Ordinance 2 is for the second two phases.
Yes,
Right.
that's correct.
So what's the benefit of, if there's not a size on the acres that we're going to exceed, what's the benefit of doing 2? Because doesn't the TIF start once they start construction?
Right.
So from the city's standpoint, wouldn't it be more beneficial for us to start both of them at the same time? Because where this ends up is, let's say it takes them 2 or 3 years to start and finish phase 2 and 3. Well, that could get us to the end of that obligation on the TIF 2 or 3 years sooner, meaning that we would get the full benefit of.
Well, it's when they start the construction in the particular district.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So if you have 2 different phases, they start phase 1 this year, and they work through phase 1, and they start phase 2 3 or 4 years down the road. Well, now you're going to be 30 years on that second district that started 3 or 4 years later. So you're going to realize the full extent of the property values, 4 years after you're realizing them from the first one. You kind of sync them up, and I think maybe for you might make things a little easier because now you're doing everything in the same calendar.
I don't know.
I'm just wondering what the benefit is to having 2 different ones for us.
I don't know if there's a benefit for us. I don't know if there's a detriment for us, quite frankly. I mean, I think what we're looking at is probably at least a year to construction, if not a year and a half
For phase
on phase 1.
For phase 1.
And so at that point in time, then those properties will start generating property tax, and we'll start realizing whatever our percentage share of it is. And the percentage that goes to the developer, the clock starts ticking in. So phase 2 and 3, let's say 4 years down the road, the clock doesn't start ticking until they start development there.
So my point in that is, so let's say the clock starts ticking on, let's just say August 1st of 2025. Right? It starts August 1st of this year. 30 years from that point, which would be August 2nd of 2055, we start realizing the full impact of the tax values from those properties built. Versus if you have a second district, and it starts in 2030, now it's gonna be 2060 before you're realizing the full value of those.
I think that, I get your point. So in other words, possibly that phase 2 and 3 would be 26 years instead of the 30 years. If they wait 4 years,
That's my
if the
point.
clock starts ticking when they do the first one, okay. I can't tell you that, would that be beneficial to the city? I think arguably it would, okay? Would the developer be willing to do that? I don't know why he would. I don't get any sense that they'd be willing to do that, because it just doesn't make economic sense for them. And, as we've seen the projection numbers, there's no expectation that they're gonna recoup all of their infrastructure costs. They're gonna, I don't know that it was structured. Well, it probably was structured that way just for that reason. That they knew that 2 and 3 wasn't gonna start until 1 happened first, so.
Any other comments, questions? Wait, 3.
That was good.
I'll close the laws and ordinances committee at 7:11.
All right,
Mr. Powell, maybe we take a 5-minute break?
absolutely.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah, there you go. And you're like,
Did Brian come back?